Hey, everybody, and thanks for joining me on another episode of Straight Jacket White Rabbit. My name's Adam, and as always, I'll be your host. You guys, tonight I wanted to dig into a topic I've done a video or two on before in the past. I love this topic. I want to do a story on Bigfoot, but not just any Bigfoot, you guys. I want to do the Bigfoots of specifically Northeast Canada, about 250 miles to be precise, outside of Ontario. 250 miles northeast outside of Ontario. There is a place called Snelgrove Lake. And in the early 2000s, roughly 2002, there were reports from this man and his friends who owned a cabin. It is the only cabin on Snelgrove Lake. Now, let me set you off before I tell you these men's story by telling you that Snellgrove Lake is not a place that you can get to by simply walking in. This would be extreme hiking at its best if you manage to get out this far. These are woods filled with giant, large bears, moose, a bunch of other dangerous animals. And this is, I believe, like I said, I think it's 175 miles from the nearest town, about 250 miles from Ontario. So most people who go here for fishing or hunting get flown in by seaplane. You have to have a plane that can land on water to get here even. Now, having said that, these men were flown up to go to their cabin, and before 2002, they had been up to this cabin multiple times, and they'd had strange occurrences. They'd heard knocking noises off in the distance, wood knocking. They'd heard strange howls. They've felt things watching them. But this time was different in 2002, you guys. This time, it felt like they had encroached on something else's territory. Because this time, while they were at the cabin, the first night there at the lake, the men started hearing large thuds against the cabin walls and roof. Now, they had no idea what was causing this. They were getting concerned. They went out, looked, had flashlights. They have weapons. They have guns and rifles with them. Mostly fishing gear, but they do have weapons with them. Now, the men couldn't find anything. They heard rustling around, just out of sight, basically. Branches breaking, these types of noises. Now, when the men returned inside the cabin, the continuous banging on the roof and the sides of the cabin continued on and off throughout the night. At one point during the night, one of the men said that the cabin shook so violently that he thought that they were literally going to be in danger of it collapsing or the foundation giving way. He said you could feel the vibrations through the floor and walls, like something huge was pounding on this cabin. But here's the thing. They said it was coming from multiple sides. As he rushed and woke up his friends, the cabin ceased to shake. A few of them did experience it before it stopped, but not all of them. But what in these woods could have made this cabin shake like this? I mean, this is like a full-grown moose is ramming the side of the wall. Those of you who have ever seen a moose in real life know that those are really large creatures. But there was no moose attacking the side of this cabin, let alone not multiple sides. The next day, the men go outside to investigate, and they see rocks, large rocks, some of them the size of softballs, tennis balls, things of this nature. And they can see where they've impacted the side of the cabin. There are even rocks still on the roof. Now, the men were thinking maybe someone was messing with them, but it just didn't add up because they were all inside the cabin accounted for. And who, like who would, in their right mind, hike this deep into the wilderness and start messing with four random men who were armed? Now, this cabin became even more famous because when they left, the owners did what they normally do to keep bears and such out of the cabin. And they placed large boards about 3 feet in length, about 2 feet in width, in front of the doors to the cabin. Now, in these boards, they had dozens of screws screwed up through the board so that when they placed it down, the screws would be pointing up like this, so that if something stepped on it, that didn't go into the cabin and it ran off. This next time they returned to the cabin was different because the cabin was not only destroyed, and I mean on the inside, you guys, it was, I saw the video, the insurance video this man sent in. It was utterly destroyed. Everything pulled off the walls. The refrigerator pulled down and opened and gone through. Everything on shelves knocked out. Everything in cupboards pulled out and knocked onto the floor. The sink was ripped from the wall and laying on the floor. And there was no sign of claw damage to anything. Not the inside of the refrigerator, not to the door itself. There were no claw marks to be seen anywhere. Matter of fact, the men couldn't find any kind of teeth marks or claw marks anywhere. Now, if you haven't seen this footage, it's readily available online. You can look it up fairly easily. I'm not going to insert it here into my video, but you can go look this up. This man in Snellgrove, Alaska's cabin was just utterly trashed. Well, he sent in the claim, but he still wanted to know what was going on. And he noticed that one of the boards placed in front of the doors had a large, what appeared to be footprint on the board, along with bloodstains and what appeared to be flesh. Wanting to be thorough, the man sent this in for DNA testing. Now, to not hold you in suspense, the DNA testing came back with something really, really interesting, you guys. It came back with human chimp DNA. Human DNA that had markers in it that had no place being there, that were markers from chimpanzee DNA. Now, a lot of people say that it was some sort of a lab error, and I'm not going to 100% discount that. I don't know enough about the process. But a lot of people believe that this unknown sample of primate DNA was Bigfoot and is Bigfoot DNA. This cabin, since these occurrences happened, you guys, this cabin has become extraordinarily popular, both in the Bigfoot community and in just the avid outdoors community. There have been over 5 shows filmed at this cabin about this incident and follow-ups to this incident. Now, there's some important things to go with this. They've done more testing, and the DNA is still not conclusive to any known primate. There is no 100% match to any known primate. I'll say that again. Any known primate in our DNA database to the DNA that was presented off of these screws to these labs. Now, people argue that the DNA must have been somehow contaminated or over time, since these people had not been back to the cabin in quite some time. However, like I said, I'm not an expert in this field, but they did something that was called DNA barcoding, relatively new process back then, and they were able to pull out the same type of DNA off of this that they got the first results with, which is a non-conclusive primate DNA that is not exactly human and it's not exactly monkey or chimp. Could this be DNA from the actual creature Bigfoot? Now, I say actual creature Bigfoot. There's more than one Bigfoot, obviously, you guys. These things grow around in family units, for gosh sakes. I mean, people have seen them roaming in packs. So we assume they're family units. They do appear to have family units as far as researchers have been able to deduce with the way that they've found nests arranged and things like this. But Snellgrove Lake, you guys, tons of these, like I said, TV shows, Discovery Channel, History Channel, that the History Channel did I can't remember the name of the show now, Monster Quest. They did an episode on Monster Quest on it. Like I said, the Discovery Channel did stuff on it. I mean, it was a fairly popular spot to look into. And what a lot of people found is not only is there enough food source in and around Snelgrove Lake to sustain these animals at fairly large numbers, but Snellgrove Lake contains something that American Sasquatch researcher Matt Moneymaker and the BFRO have insisted for years that the Bigfoot need and live on. You guys, that's a deer. Sorry about that. It's a deer population. Snellgrove Lake has a very large white-tailed deer population amongst lots of other mammals in the area that these things could be feeding on, including and up to possibly the moose population. Those are large creatures, but if they could take them down, I mean, if anything could take down a moose on its own, it would be, I'm guessing, a family of these Bigfoot. But on top of this, they've also found a lot of blueberries blooming and raspberries blooming in the immediate area of Snellgrove Lake. Now, let me tell you why this is important. Not only are there dozens of accounts of Bigfoots being caught out in the open during hiking trips and camping trips and things of this nature, but they're usually seen eating. They're usually eating on berries or things like this in the woods. These are creatures who do kill for meat. They are believed to take down deer, but they're also scavengers, you guys. They look for opportunistic ways to feed, like berries. And one of the reasons they follow the berries is because the deer follow the berries, okay? White-tailed deer are known to follow the bloom of these plants when they start coming up in spring. The first time where the berries start off ripe, and they'll follow where the berries are so that they can feed. Who's to say the Sasquatch is not doing this to both follow the deer and follow the berries to get food? Now, one of the research teams that went to this cabin also had experiences. And I should actually correct myself there. 3 total TV crews that went up to this cabin had experiences. But one in particular I want to talk about is the History Channel crew. They had, I believe it was 6 people at this cabin in Snellgrove Lake, and they had a repeat of the exact type of activity that they were told about in the original 2002 incident. Now, they were at this cabin in, I believe it was 2005, and this is 2005, this is years later, you guys, and they had a repeat of the exact kind of behavior. Now, a lot of people think that as far as the cabin being broken into, it might have just been a bear. Well, real quick, I'm just going to dispel that. When this happened to their cabin, when the rocks were being thrown, all these other times, this is in the middle, you guys, of the beginning of hibernation season. Most bears were sleeping at that point, especially this far north. It's already cold. It's already getting chilly. The berries are starting to go away. Now, here's why this is important. because the research team that came in for the History Channel that experienced the rock throwing and all of these things, they experienced it all. Overnight, they experienced tennis ball sized rocks being thrown at the cabin. They were out there by themselves. All members were accounted for in the cabin while they were hearing it being thrown stones at. In the morning, like I said, tennis ball sized rocks all over the roof, all over the ground outside the sides of this cabin. However, when they did do a return trip after this initial trip, and I'm sure there were some other discoveries during this trip, but I'm not going to go into that. When they left and they came back, guys, they came back for another, we'll say, I want to say it was just under a year later they came back. But the problem is the berries weren't in season around there, and the deer population also were not present around the cabin at this point in time. The berries and things were blooming about 110 miles away, up at near another lake. Here's why that's important, because when this camera crew came back that time and the berries weren't in season, they didn't experience any activity. Nor have the other people who've gone to this cabin during the seasons where the berries were not growing. They didn't have problems in the dead middle of winter because the berries were not there. The food source had moved on. I think what we have here is an example of Sasquatches protecting their hunting grounds, possibly even their hunting/living areas. Think about it. The time that they came back and the growing season there was not in full swing and the berries were not ripe yet, they had no encounters, no noises, no nothing. But they did get a report from a pilot, reliable witness, who overheard radio chatter about, it was roughly 100 miles away, a Bigfoot sighting between a mom and her son while they were out picking berries at this location. So is it that hard to believe that these things are following the food source? I mean, a lot of other animals do this, you guys. They follow a set path yearly of where they go hunting. When they follow, they know when the plants are going to be ripe there. So they know when the deer are going to be feeding there, and it's going to be their best opportune time to take down these large game or larger game. Now, for people who are saying, they don't think Bigfoot hunts deer, I honestly believe they do, you guys. This is a massive, you're talking about a massive primate. This thing is going to take a lot of fuel to run its body. Picking berries aside, picking berries alone is not enough to feed a creature like this. You need a sustainable hunted source of protein. You need animals. And this is, I believe, how Bigfoot is surviving. He is following where the deer go. Now, this is the same behavior that we see here in the United States as far as where the food for the deer is usually where you're seeing the Bigfoots at that time of year. Snelgrove Lake is also interesting because not only does it have an array of different berries from blueberries to raspberries and so on, but it has such an abundance of wildlife that even if this thing was not hunting deer, they have otter and beaver and wolf and moose and bear, and they have such a vast array of wildlife there that it's entirely possible that this thing has a readily year-long supply of food. Now, not all accounts at Snellgrove Lake have been documented on TV. There were accounts that I were able to dig up that were written account records, historical records in newspapers, also a few in books, where they claim that these creatures are aggressively protecting the area around this lake. There was the oldest one that I could find was from the mid to late 1800s. It was 1860s, I believe. Was a letter from fur traders talking about they ran into a large, hairy creature in the woods around this lake, and it chased them off, throwing stones and sticks and logs at them. It made a horrible howling scream in the distance that echoed through the valley. There is a long history of sightings of unusual, hairy, upright, bipedal creatures in this area. Now, yes, there are some very large bears in this area, you guys, but bears don't account for Bigfoot. I'm not saying they can never be mistaken for a Bigfoot, you guys, but the chances are very slim, especially when you're dealing with people who are coming this far out. These are not people who have no idea what's in the outdoors. These are usually skilled outdoorsmen who are coming out, being flown out and chartered out to these lakes and areas deeper into the backcountry in Canada. Yes, can bears stand on two legs? Absolutely. Can bears get into cabins and destroy them? Absolutely. But there are things here that don't make sense. When the cabin was destroyed and the refrigerator knocked open and gone through, there were no bite marks or claw marks to the inside of the refrigerator, which is usually where bears try to get to because it's the insulation in your fridge that smells like formaldehyde and other types of chemicals, which to these bears resemble ant colonies. That's usually why they try to get in your fridge, not for the food in your fridge, but because the insulation itself smells like things that they eat naturally in the wild. Now, that being said, people say, well, we saw something dark and furry and it walked upright. And people say, well, bears stand on two legs. Yes, and bears can walk slightly on two legs, but they waddle, you guys. It is not a human gated walk. It's a waddle that these things do. These people are talking about seeing and experiencing creatures in this area that are walking bipedally on two legs and in some case running on two legs. One thing a bear does not do ever is run on two legs. It can waddle. It can kind of walk, but it cannot run on two legs. And these creatures have been seen doing this. Now, there are also a suspicious, I'll say, amount of disappearances in these woods and surrounding woods in this area for about 150 to 200-mile radius. It seems that a lot of people who go into these woods just get chalked up as lost. These hikers got lost. These campers got lost. These fishermen got lost. Or they never met up with their charter plane to get out of the area that they had been chartered into. They never responded to their check-in times via satellite phones. There's a lot of missing people out here. Are we dealing with an area where Sasquatch is killing people who are encroaching on their territory? There are reports that Sasquatches have attacked and eaten human beings. Is that what we're dealing with? Are we dealing with a tribe of Sasquatch that are hostile to mankind? And people say, well, why didn't they attack the men in the cabin? Well, that's not to say that they couldn't have or that they haven't attacked other people. They could have just been trying to simply ward off these people from encroaching on, like I said, their hunting grounds. But who's to say some of these people who haven't disappeared, these hikers and fishermen and hunters who have vanished in these woods, have not vanished because they came across a territory of this animal, that it didn't want them there, and that it dealt with them accordingly. Most of these people's bodies are never recovered, unfortunately. Canada has some very vast wilderness, you guys. It's not like here in the United States. Don't get me wrong, we have some areas of the United States, I know, that are pretty good, dense wilderness. But nothing like Canada, okay? Canada has wilderness like Alaska has wilderness. Okay, it's just kind of flipping everywhere if you're not in a major city. these creatures could be not only surviving in Canada, but they could be thriving. Think about all of the forestation or the deforestation and things we've done here in America that they haven't done to a vast majority of Canada yet. We could have scared a lot of the Sasquatches that used to live in American territories. We could have scared them further north into Canada, which is why there happens to be larger amounts of sightings up in Canada or Northern America near the Canadian border. Um, Also on the Pacific route leading up towards Alaska through Canada. But there are things that people have put together, like I said, like following the berries grow seasons where the deer are, because the deer will follow the berries and the Bigfoots will follow the deer. And they've had a lot of success looking for these creatures in these areas because of ideas like this that have been propagated in the Bigfoot community. I think this is an awesome thing. Once we know its food sources, we can start tracking these things more reliably and eventually have 100% concrete scientific proof that they do exist. They are here. They are a species. Be it whether you believe they're aliens, whether you believe they're a intelligent human ancestor, whatever you believe these creatures are, something is roaming through these woods. Something is attacking people. And this, don't get me wrong, you guys, this cabin attack, while a spectacular story, is not a lone instance. There are instances in California, Washington, all over the United States of these things throwing things at cabins, um, being curious and encroaching on cabins, looking through windows, tree knocks, loud roars in the middle of the forests. But all of these elements combined with the video photo of the destroyed cabin, with the DNA as evidence on the screw boards in front of the doors of this cabin. I mean, there's just so much evidence that something is here and it's telling these people to leave. It's telling these people that they are not welcome in this thing's territory. These are not the behaviors of a bear. I mean, the throwing of objects alone. Moose don't throw rocks. Bears don't throw rocks. Okay, deer, coyotes, wolves, foxes, none of badgers, otters, none of these animals throw rocks that we've ever witnessed. So what could it be that was throwing stones the size of tennis balls and softballs at these cabins? Large, large logs and wooden branches being thrown at these cabins. If you don't believe in Bigfoot, what do you believe is doing all of this? Because this isn't just an occurrence in Canada. This isn't just an occurrence in the United States. These are occurrences that are happening worldwide, you guys. From Russia to China, all over Asia, all over pretty much anywhere there's woodland, anywhere there's a forest, or anywhere there is, I was going to say forest again, but, or not forest again, I'm sorry, I was going to say swamp, but I think that kind of encompasses any kind of marshy, tree filled terrain, any kind of forest, rainforest, bogs, swamplands. These are prime areas for Sasquatches, you guys. Even wetlands with tall grass have been reported sightings of these creatures. So, what attacked this man's cabin? Is it really what the DNA evidence suggested, which is an undiscovered species of primate? Now, they've tried to repeat these experiments and they've gotten some interesting results at this cabin. But what I think they need to do is put out the boards again. Keep trying to see if you can get a repeat of the results of this. Set up new booby traps, new cameras, They've caught things on thermal just out of sight from the camera, shifting around and walking around, where it's hard to see what it is. But even these high-tech cameras, you guys, are not a guarantee to catch a sighting of Bigfoot. Because, as I've said on other videos I've done on this, I believe that Bigfoot can see the light from these cameras, the infrared light and the light sources for the night vision cameras. I believe that they are able somehow to see these things and avoid them. Either they're that smart and cautious, or they can actually see the spectrum of light that these cameras are using to film in the dark, to film in infrared. It's entirely plausible, you guys, that this is the way that they've been able to avoid us for so long. Now, also, a lot of people talk about Bigfoot like they're a dumb animal. And I don't mean all animals are dumb. I'm just saying that's the way they talk about them. What if this thing is close to our level of intelligence, but never evolved things like fire making or mechanics or things of this nature, or at least not yet to our level? What if this was a species that was forced to hide out of our genetic ancestors because our ancestors were killing them off? We know that humanoids of one branch of our human ancestry tree or another were going out and wiping each other out as the dominant species fight to take over. And we wiped out all the Neanderthals. Who's to say we weren't wiping out this species, but they were smart enough to go into places that we wouldn't have gone? And if you think about this, where are humans throughout history terrified of? The woods. We've made stories and legends about things in the woods that hunt us down. Stay out of the woods at night. Woods are dangerous. Maybe they were smart enough to know that we didn't go into the woods a lot of the time, especially not at night. Maybe they knew they'd be safe there, that they could sleep there and create their own living environment basically there. Humans back then, back in history, were only going into the woods during the day. We never went in the woods at night, not without large parties of people with us. And even then, it was usually done carefully. They, they went through roads and in through the forest on these little trails and roads, but they did it quickly and expeditiously to try to get through and to the other side without an issue. They were afraid of these woods back then, back in the 18, 17, 1600s and going further back. Who's to say that our ancestors, whatever, if that's what these things are, didn't manipulate and use this fact to their advantage, so that they knew that was where they had the best chance of being safe from us. Let's be honest, we were already wiping out other branches of the family tree back then. We're like, nope, we're the dominant species, and we went and killed them. Who's to say we weren't wiping out this species of hominid, these giant apes, with the tools that we've learned to create it, that we learned to create? And this thing didn't just take off and decide to get away from us. Maybe they were smarter than us. Maybe they were smart enough to get away from us and stay away from us, and they just have no interest in our technology. Maybe they enjoy their lives the way they are. Anyways, I could shoot down rabbit hole after rabbit hole about these things. I love these topics. If you've ever heard of this, awesome. If you haven't, welcome to your introduction on Snelgrove Lake. It's an absolutely amazing story. So from Straight Jacket White Rabbit to all of you out there, I really appreciate all of your love and support. I appreciate all your memberships and donations. You guys are so amazing. You're keeping my channel up and running. Thank you to my big brother, Jay Dreamers. Jay, you're awesome. I love you, man. Thank you to my mom, who's also being really supportive during all of this, and my wife and my kid. And just thank you to my daughter and my grandkids. I love the fact that I have such a supportive family and such a supportive online community. You guys make it worth doing this, and I love talking about this stuff. So it energizes me to be able to talk to you guys about this stuff and bring it to you. Um, I got lots more topics coming. I am going to do another video this week so that you guys don't have to wait a week in between. I know I've been doing a week in between videos for a few weeks now. That is going to stop. I am going to start doing multiple videos a week. Like I said, I appreciate all you guys' support. Be sure to hit that like and share. If you haven't, hit the subscribe button on your way out. Much love to you all. This is Straight Jacket White Rabbit saying, take care of each other, love each other, and I'll see you later.